G'day everybody, just waiting for everyone to tune in. We've got an amazing interview today with Mike Altamura, one of Australia's best managers, is an encyclopedia of boxing, knows so much about this game. Please feel free to tune in, listen, throw some questions at us, see how we can get some information off Mike. Just wait for everybody to tune in, and also Mike himself. There we go. We're picking a few people up right now. G'day. We're back on. Here we go. I'll just try and find Mike. Hopefully we'll get a hold of Mike very shortly and we can join. Here he is. G'day, mate. How's things? Can you hear me?
Yeah, got you, G. How are you?
Good, I got you. I'm excellent, mate. Good to see you in this crazy world we're living in at the moment. How have you been coping?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. I'm accustomed to being bunkered down at various stages in my life and just needing to focus different projects. So just making the most of the downtime. It's good not to be jet lagged and to be fully recovered for once. You know, like it's amazing how much the body feels refreshed.
Mate, you've travelled so much over the last 2 years. You'd be up with some sort of world record of flights, I'm sure. There've been a lot of jet lag time.
2018, definitely. I did 111 flights in 2018. So
wow.
I think I'm going to stay stuck at like 13 this year.
so when you heard lockdown, you were pretty happy.
For a week, and then it just becomes a little monotonous just because your life's accustomed to such a different pace. You know what I'm saying?
That's yeah.
I'm not like in a situation like guys like yourself where you can make the most of the time at home and spend it with your kids or anything like that. I mean, so for me, it's like I'm always open to that adventure because I'm in a position in my life that I can do that, you know. I don't have
that's right.
My life, at least just yet. So it's kind of an awkward transition. But the one thing I've been getting through is my VHS tape collection. So
nice. You still have a player, do you? VHS player?
Bro, give me a second. I'll show you. So
I need to see this.
This is big time boxing from like 2005.
So who are we watching there? Who's that just got out of the ring?
This is where I got my listings. We're getting out of the ring. That would be Shane Lockett against David Smith.
Oh, that's Shane Lockett. Welterweights? No?
No, like 126.
Right. Okay. Yep.
Unit. That's finalising.
Yeah, nice.
Torrents going here. And I'm getting through. I doubled my productivity by setting up 2 systems.
Perfect. Well, Glenn Azar knows there. G'day, Glenn. Nice for you to tune in. Featherweights, you remembers.
126. Thank you, Glenn, for confirming. My memory's not as bad as I thought it was.
Oh, that's excellent, mate. I want us to get to know a bit more of Mike, the person, and your life growing up, and I suppose what it was like. Obviously, you're from Victoria, and how you got into this crazy world of boxing, and then you do wrestling, and you do many things. So, can you give us an insight on your early childhood and how that was?
Good question. Tough upbringing. My dad's pretty hard to get along with, in that he's from that old school, very, very stern upbringing, very firm on you. And he's a former fighter. So he's a former fighter, and he was training quite a few boxers while growing up. He travelled with the national team a few times. So travelled with the junior national team, was working with the Victorian state team back in the day. So when I was growing up in the sport, he was always in and around it still, especially as a coach. And So I guess that kind of fixed the interest. Like I've said to people, like the first boxer I heard of wasn't Sugar Ray Leonard or Muhammad Ali, or say even you think of 80 stalwarts. There's one right there behind me, Alexis Arguello.
Oh yeah, great man.
Pryor or anyone like that. It was Graham Porky Brook, and that's because he was my brother's favorite fighter. So, you know, like I kind of grew up with Porky Brook, and then Lester Ellis, who was my idol as well. And I guess that kind of just fixed the interest in the sport. But then also, my eldest brother was a huge pro wrestling fan. So that's where the attachment to professional wrestling comes in too. So essentially, it was like a combination. But the boxing, like, you got to think, like back in the day, like videotapes in the mid to late 80s were $10. And you got to think of times what people were earning. So it's not like anyone had a deep collection. There's no YouTube, nothing like that. So you had to really go out and find fight content back in the day. And I remember it was probably about maybe 1992, 1993, where I started going out and being active myself, buying the Fist magazine, wanting to, like, then craving the information on the American fights. So KO magazine, things like that. And just kind of, that set things in motion. I remember maybe when I was about 9 or 10, I think I was in grade 4. So it was probably just before I was 10. So it was about 9. And for a project at school, I created my own wrestling and boxing magazine. So it was like half wrestling, half pro wrestling, half boxing, and just writing my own content. And I'm sure it was absolutely terrible. But
you are a journalist as well. So
yeah,
it all come together at the same time, I suppose.
So all of that early work paid off, right, in the end.
Yeah,
So
yeah, right.
That kind of created an interest. And then I think probably, like, boxing-wise, what really, really set it in motion, where I was like, man, I want to work in this industry someday, was the George Foreman Michael Moorer fight. So that was in November '94, and I remember going to the pub with my brothers and my dad, and essentially seeing a miracle happen before my eyes, because there was no way on earth in my head that this, what was he, 45 years of age, right? This 45-year-old at that stage in history should be pulling off an upset like that. And I remember when he landed that final 1-2 on Mora, just thinking, he ain't going to get back up. Like, and it's just the beauty of the theater of the unexpected.
Yeah, that's right.
And we've all had it go both ways. We've both had victories. Look, I had it with PJ Doney, you know, victory against the Green in Japan. And when you shock the world, it's the best feeling.
Yep.
And I had Isaac Dogbe, a 12-1 favorite in Madison Square Garden, get upset. So I've been on both sides of the spectrum. But I think that's really what attracted my interest to the sport. And it just kind of grew from there. And it was, I've got to say, like, on my side, it was very discouraged at home. Obviously, my mum didn't want me fighting or anything.
Yeah.
And my eldest brother had fought, and, you know, that wasn't something that she was particularly excited about. So I stayed in the gym and stayed active with my dad. But I had to find different ways to work a way into the sport. So I actually started with Ray Wheatley's World of Boxing, if you remember that old journal newspaper.
Yep, I do that.
I started working for Ray when I was 11. I was doing amateur boxing results. And that just kind of slowly grew into other interests. And then, yeah, when I launched my own website in 2000 and just stumbled into the management by accident. So, and I've been trying to escape since, and I'm stuck here.
And you'll never get out. You know too much. You'll always get those phone calls from everybody. Oh, do you know this guy, Mike? But for people just listening, and if they don't know Mike is the absolute encyclopedia of boxing. There's not much you don't know about fights or fighters from a lot of areas. I suppose you've studied, but that's part of your job now, isn't it? You know, you've got to know the history. You've got to know everything about the game.
Yeah, it used to be so much sharper, though. When I had more time available, it was less jet lagged. So I feel like in this lockdown period now that my knowledge is starting to come back a bit. Just because and you can sit and read and be more relaxed. You know, like I got things here. I'll show you some of the things here. Hopefully your viewers don't mind me taking them here, there, and everywhere. But
no, it's good.
But like, here's like a pile of things I've got just here in the office to read, and then just various things. Like I got this is a book. Hopefully you can get a clear look at that. Journeyman. So Journeyman Michael Murray. So things like that fascinate me, you know, like that's a guy who retired with like a sub 500 record, but
wow,
his story's not told. You know, people don't know much about it. Then I've got these. This is boxing illustrated from 1969. I've got the Hagler Duran special. And
wow.
other things like the Tyson Bruno program. So that's from the rematch.
The rematch, was that 6 round? Was that the rematch? The 6 round knockout, was it? 3 rounds.
Remember, Bruno had the problems with his eyes.
Yeah.
He had retina problems around then, so he went into the ring petrified.
Geez, I'll tell you.
That's the best one, man.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Even though you might never read those things, I just looked at some magazines the other day, some old magazines. Even though you might never ever read them again, you can never part with them. Like you can't just put them in the bin.
Bro, I got like, when people say they've got thousands, I literally got thousands. You know, like they're stocked up. So like part of what I've been doing in this time too is just listing and ordering them.
Yep.
So that I know what I actually have in the collection, and then when I set everything up properly, I know, okay, I can go to, say, KO Magazine and find the copy I have. And then there's a little bit of a breakdown of what's in it. So, you know, like for each one of them, I'm listing, say if there's like 10 interesting articles in it, I've got each of them listed. So then if I go into my document and say I click Marvin Hagler, it'll bring up everything I got on Hagler in the archives, because most of these stories, you don't find them online. Like I was reading one of the old boxing illustrated magazines the other day from, I think it was like 1968, about a gentleman named Canto Robledo. Canto Robledo was a blind trainer. So he was a boxer in the 30s. And as you know, the fighters used to break their shoes in with resin back in those days. And there's a little bit of errant resin in the ring. It got into his eye, and he wound up
wow,
losing.
what a story.
So the article explains about how he stayed involved in the sport and how instinctively he knows off of the rhythm he's hearing of how the fighters hit in the bag or jumping a rope or whatever, how precisely they're undertaking the activity. So that's interesting, because I'd never heard of the guy, being honest. And you know, you just always say, like, you immerse yourself with knowledge and you remain relevant in this game. You become empowered. So I've got to practice what I preach. So I'm always reading.
That's right, yeah. So during this time, is that what you've been keeping yourself busy with? A lot of reading, a lot of knowledge. Obviously, nobody knows when next fights are coming up and that sort of stuff. You've just been soaking up knowledge, reading, that sort of stuff?
That's all you can do. And you try and plan a little bit for the future. We had a interesting conference call a few days ago with some of the core team at MTK. 1 second, is that on my side? There we are. I don't know what I pressed there. Yeah, we had an interesting meeting with some of our core staff at MTK. Just kind of looking at how to plan and what to anticipate during these times, but it really is like a day-by-day proposition. You can essentially try and plan for events around, say, I think probably the earliest you're looking at mid to late July, and that's if everything ideally worked perfect, where, you know, in essence, the ban is lifted in a week, the next week or two, and then you can plan to do shows behind closed doors. So what I'd say to all of the athletes, especially I know on your side, working with Jack Bowen, we work together with Jack Bowen and Taylor Robertson, two of our young rising stars.
That's it.
just stay in condition. I'm not saying stay ready, because stay ready essentially is suggesting that you might get a call in 2 weeks. But maintain your base conditions so that if you have to go to camp and be ready in 5 to 6 weeks, you can turn it around. You know, don't be like one of those fighters that does nothing in the downtime, and then when you come back, you got no timing, because I'm telling you, nobody's going to be given 12 to 14 weeks to fight coming out of COVID-19.
That's right.
Up and running, it's going to be who's ready, who's freshest, and who's prepared to take a little bit of a chance immediately.
Yeah, 100%. Well, luckily we booked in another event for November the 7th, and I'm glad. I'm glad that I was thinking, oh, we could do another one in the middle of the year, but the way the world is, I'm glad that's the date we booked in rather than June, July, anything like that, you know?
Yeah. This might be the first year in boxing history where the fighter of the year essentially has one fight, and the prospect of the year is like 2, maybe.
Yeah, that's it's amazing.
It's an anomaly that we never see. I know that there's been downtime and serious, like similar periods in both world wars, but in terms of like our generation, this is totally unprecedented.
If you mentioned boxing behind closed doors,
yeah,
I get it. It sounds great. They're doing it in football. Football have massive TV money, and that's what's keeping them alive.
Yeah.
How do you think it works in boxing? Or is it only those top promoters? Or otherwise fighters are going to have to fight for free. Nobody wants to do that. But everybody's got to balance out somewhere, don't they?
It's a hard dichotomy to work out. But I look at it that it goes both ways. Are you going to have your absolute elite fights without any gate revenue? It's going to be very, very tough, because say a fight that might have generated $4 or $5 million at the gate, without that revenue, you might be able to retain sponsorship, but who in their right mind is going to be prepared to chance raising that money on pay-per-view on a platform like that, especially right now when so many people are doing it tough financially and might not be prepared to pay. You know, in the US, it's like $79, $89, $95 for a pay-per-view.
Yep.
Like that, a lot of people, but even if you look at subscriptions, like there's been a lot of people unsubscribing from DAZN and places like that, and it's going to take a while for them to come back. So the economy doesn't really stack up there. The other thing is, I think TV, because they're clamoring for content, if you can beat other sports back, so if you can beat the NBA back, if you can beat, say, Major League Baseball, if you beat the NFL back, then there's openings for TV content. But in order for that to happen, there's got to be a budget for some decent fights. You can't be putting, say, 6-round level fights internationally on a network like ESPN or Fox Sports or that. So it's a hard balance, because as you know yourself, like especially at that mid to lower tier, most of the revenue is generated outside of TV. So it kind of changes the whole dynamic, but at least a few people in the industry are going to be able to eat rather than nobody at all. So that's a positive.
That's right. And also I've even thought, like, okay, if they come back and we can do local shows, but then they still make you do social distancing of 2 meters or whatever it may be in different countries, is that one seat gets removed and you've got to sit like that. You know, anything like this could happen, which mean that's going to be half the audience. So who's going to give a little bit when it comes to, you know, your journeyman? That obviously, as we know, the journeyman and the guys that are there on a couple of weeks' notice, they end up taking more money. But will that money be there now? You know, like it's tough. It's going to be tough for everybody coming back.
And here's the other thing too. You got your guys that are accustomed to dictating how they do business because they're major league ticket sellers. Right now, in this particular time in history, ticket sellers are irrelevant. It's what you can attract on TV. If you can't attract anything on TV, then you better be prepared to get in there and fight. Nobody's going to care to pad your record from a TV perspective.
That's right. That's right, especially if that revenue's not there to create a top-level elite, like you said, an elite level fight for everybody to tune in. You know, like if it's a lesser level, then exactly, it's just all got a balance, and that's going to be one of the tricky things coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's been like part of the discussions that we've been undertaking. The other thing is just like looking at how we can structure things a little better and things that we can control during these times. So, say for example, scouting the top tier amateurs, watching footage, going back over people that we've been in discussion with, and seeing whether we can either reapproach or re-enter talks with them. All of that's still relevant during these times. You know, like just everything is frozen doesn't mean it's stopped, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a mad time. I suppose everybody's just running on the spot at the moment, trying to do things. Like we're looking at, okay, when can the gym reopen, or even outdoor training, and we put in groups of 10 only. It's just everybody's world, whether the government have shut you down or not. Everyone's got issues, and look, if we don't adapt, we get left behind, don't we?
Absolutely, evolve or evaporate.
That's right. It's 100%.
But it is,
Mike. Yep.
It is hard when you know so many good people in the industry and you see them doing it tough during these times. You know, it's depressive sometimes when you go online and you see that.
Yeah, that's right. Mate, it's a tough one. Mike, you started your management career very young. How old were you when you started out?
17.
When you started managing?
17.
17. Who was your first Australian athlete / boxer that you worked with?
First Australian, gosh. My dad had a journeyman heavyweight. I helped him out with that kid a little bit. Tommy Hammer. He was like 3 and 7.
Yep.
So that would be, say, if you're looking at like the first, that would be the first.
Yep.
The first fighters that actually started, then I had a kid, Ashley White, if you remember him. He was
Ashley White, yeah.
He was a semi-name in kickboxing. I worked with him a couple of fights.
Light welter.
A bit higher, welterweight.
He fought. I had a guy, Graham Foley, and he fought him. He fought Graham. Actually, I think Glenn Azar actually boxed on that same show. It was one of Brian Kerwin and Angelo DiCarlo's shows.
Against Johnny Pariah, I think he boxed. Yeah, so I was. I worked with Ashley for 2 fights, a win and a loss. So he's like one of them. You remember, obviously, Keena Malpatita?
Yep, so Keena, yep.
In what, 2004, I think?
And won the world title.
Yeah, ended up.
Which world title did she win?
The WBA.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was like an era of boxing there, like Australian women's boxing. There was Keena, Sharon Anyos assisted to matchmake a few of her fights. Erin McGowan, Diana Prazak. There's like basically just about every Australian female that had captured a world title, I'd work with them in some capacity.
Mate, talking to Keena Malpatita, I remember her very first amateur fight. I was actually asked to judge. It was amazing how much work. She must have been a really, really hard worker and like a sponge to soak up knowledge, because she was a surfer, wasn't she? She surfed. She's from Peru.
Yeah.
Am I right? Peru came to Australia. I don't know how she came here, but she was a surfer. She played another sport.
She was really, really talented athlete. But
yeah.
Extremely erratic in terms of temperament. Like she could, if she had a bad sparring session or a bad day in the gym, it would just drain all of her confidence completely, where she would get really, really low and really down on herself. So it was amazing to see her end up turning it around and winning a world championship.
Yeah.
And
mate, like I said, I remember judging her first fight. I remember she actually got disqualified for holding this girl in a headlock, and that might have been her only amateur fight. Actually, she might have only had 1 or 2.
Yeah, I think she had like 2, something like that.
And then went on to win a world title.
Fortunately, by the time I worked with her, she understood the rules of boxing. But it was actually, she was really talented. You know, it's just the way it goes in the sport sometimes. And like I always look at it at various levels, from fighters to managers, promoters, trainers, everything. I think the mistake a lot of people make is that they, for lack of a better expression, they nail you to the cross on their first impression of you, or their first sight of where you're at. So if they envision you as just, say, a junior matchmaker or a novice trainer, they leave you implanted in that role. They don't realize that people evolve and people grow.
100%.
You don't see anyone gauging Rafael Nadal by his first tennis tournament, or Federer by his first crack at Wimbledon. Yet you see it constantly happening in life.
Yeah, you're 100% on the money there. If people were to judge Bernard Hopkins by his first fight,
a perfect example,
which he lost.
Yeah. How about Carino Garcia? He was 0-18 at the start of his career. And turning it around and being world rated.
Who else had a bad record? I don't think he lost his first one, but the guy that beat Billy Dibb for the world title. What's his name? Tevin Farmer.
Tevin Farmer was 7-4-1.
Yeah, see.
Career. Freddie Pendleton was 13-13-1 at one stage.
It's just a message that you've just got to, if you believe in what you're doing, if you really have that passion for it, take your time, do it right, work every single day. And I say when I work with a lot of kids, like mentoring a lot of kids, I say, there's no secret to success. You just work harder than everyone else. And if you're not willing to do that, you don't really want it. That's the way it is.
Yeah, exactly right. I think that consistently, consistency is probably one of the greatest attributes of a champion in my eyes. I hear it. People always say to me all the time, like, oh, if that guy was disciplined, if that guy was switched on, he could have been anything. Well, the he could have been anything is what comes from within, and it's the character from within that is a real championship quality. So if someone doesn't possess that, then they weren't meant to be a champion. No matter how, just because someone's athletically gifted doesn't mean that they should be ordained with everything else,
Mate, to be honest, there's probably more guys with a better work ethic than actually gifted athletes that have actually made it to the top. It's only every now and again we get a freakish superstar who's got the work ethic and that natural ability. Very, very frequently, like Michael Jordan, I suppose.
Yeah, I was looking at saying the other day, I was thinking remember late career, Jordan was a little bit injury prone at times.
Yep.
Kobe Bryant was the same, riddled with injuries his last few seasons. Mayweather needed a lot more time to recover in his later years.
Even on a local level, Anthony Mundine on a local level with his hips and all the injuries.
Yeah. Oh, look, Mundine's a super freak of an athlete. Really, for a guy at his age to turn over to boxing when he did, with just a handful of amateur fights in was it in Noumea, I think.
Yeah.
And to accomplish what he did on hard work and attrition, it's amazing. I think he's very, very underrated, and because he held on too long, it kind of people have wrongfully judged him by the worst stages of his career, which have been the last few years rather than the prime. Which you look at anyone's career, you should always gauge it by the prime. Yeah,
mate, he was an amazing athlete, like a great rugby league player, and I've heard that he could have. I don't know if he got offered by Sydney Kings, but he could have been a professional basketballer as well.
Yeah, I remember that time when it was after the Zvenocki fight where he was talking about crossing over to basketball. But he's really, really talented. I remember actually once it was just before the Kessler fight. So a couple of months before the Kessler fight, he was in Perth at Craig Christian's gym. And Craig used to have this game he'd play on the wall outside, like a handball game. So Craig's playing it every day. Chock had never played a day in his life, and picked it up within probably 30 seconds. And
beat him.
Craig just tipped it. But that was Craig's court, Craig's terrain.
Yeah.
And talking to Choc that day, and he used to always, he'd take his inspiration off of other top athletes